Our first keynote speaker is Ms. Geetha Shantha.
Ms. Geetha is a director of the MOE-aided DAS Literacy Program and Staff Professional Development. She has led curriculum enhancements for the DAS through the Essential Literacy Approach and the current integrated curriculum. Formerly the Assistant Director of the DAS Academy, Geetha trained allied educators, parents and other professionals and continues to present at conferences, most recently at the 2016 International Dyslexia Association Conference. Geetha has a Master's in English and a postgraduate certificate in Learning and Teaching in Higher Education. With over 10 years of experience supporting children and adults in the area of dyslexia, Ms. Geetha constantly aspires to provide a quality service to dyslexics that searches for and realizes their true potential and provides them with a view to appreciate their own unique gifts.
It has been said that the key objective of an education is to provide choices and enable learners to make these choices. By better defining the learner's diverse needs and expanding our views on the support that is required, it is hoped that schools, teachers, and parents can help learners discover opportunities to enhance prospects and fulfill their potential. This presentation covers common themes with the aim to invoke conversations on the future of dyslexia support in Singapore with respect to the current literature. Ms. Geetha's topic today is on the promise of an education. Let's put our hands together for our first keynote speaker, Ms. Geetha. Ms. Geetha, please.
Right, thank you very much, Andy and Gillian. A very good morning to all. I see a lot of experts here seated at the auditorium, and I'm humbled to be able to make this presentation in front of all of you, as well as those who have come here determined to make a difference in the lives of the people that you work with. My title, The Promise of an Education, the intention of this presentation really is to review current perspectives and to see what is the promise of an education, the assurances that education can provide, as well as the potential of an education, and perhaps come to a conclusion on what we should be doing for our learners. No doubt you'll be learning a lot during this conference, but I'm hoping that I'll be the one and only person, especially for my international friends here, to share this bit of information with you. It's a great time to be in Singapore, ladies and gentlemen, because it's the time of the Great Singapore Sale. 66 days of shopping extravaganza, right? The best deals in town, and I mean, abundance of choices. And I mean, it's these choices really that make our ordinarily mild and well-mannered Singaporeans turn into shopping warriors, and they'll go out hunting for the best deals. And I was thinking, we've all been there before, we've all been shoppers, and what makes for a satisfying shopping experience? I think it boils down to two things. One is an appropriate amount of choices, and two, the ability to make these choices or to make decisions based on these choices in an independent manner. I mean, how many of us truly enjoyed shopping when our parents were making the decisions for us, what to buy, what to wear? Surely we enjoyed the fact that they were financing the shopping, but not so much about them making the decisions. And then I started thinking about choices. And some choices are easy to make because the advantages are very clear. For instance, I mean, if I'm about to cross the road and I'm Snapchatting, do I stop Snapchatting and look at the traffic, or do I continue to Snapchat and continue to walk? So that's an obvious choice, a no-brainer, as a colleague mentioned. But what if it was a little bit harder? For instance, let's take breakfast. You have a choice of having bran cereal and fruit, or a sugary donut with sparkles and sprinkles on it. What would you choose? Right? I mean, if you're thinking about something that's healthy for you, good for your body, you're going to opt for the bran cereal, but it's going to taste like cardboard. But if you're thinking of, oh, I've got a long day ahead, you know, I've got lots of work to do, I want to wake up to something nice, you're going to think of the donut. Both of these choices have advantages and disadvantages, and that makes making decisions a little bit harder. So let's turn our attention to the Great Singapore Sale again, yeah? And we've got a young shopper here. She's narrowed it down. She's going to take advantage of the Great Singapore Sale, and she's going to look at shoes. But these are her choices. She's got hiking boots that she can buy pumps, she can buy sneakers, or she can buy flats. Now, what would she be basing her decision on? She might be thinking about her budget, how much money she has to spend. She might be thinking about how much time she's got, and maybe she can't walk through all the shops, so she needs to narrow it down to maybe just the sneakers and the flats. She might also be thinking about what's her current need and want as far as shoes are concerned. But what if I told you, I gave you a hint about her future, and I told you that in 6 months' time, she's going to be flying off to Norway to look at the Northern Lights? Will that influence her decision on how she's going to take advantage of the Great Singapore Sale? So it appears that the current perspectives or current context does influence your decision making, but the future too greatly influences the choices that you make today. So what does choice, let's summarize. Let's talk about what's important then. One, that all of us would like to have some choices. And that two, an awareness of and a readiness to be prepared for the future as part of that decision making when it comes to choices. Now you might have enjoyed my shopping analogy. You might be inspired to go shopping after this. But what has this got to do with education? Let's think about education from the perspectives that Chomsky offers us. Chomsky said that education can take 2 points of view. One, for a pursuit of enlightenment, a creative inquiry or a critical inquiry, a betterment of oneself for a future self. But he also said that education can be about indoctrination, to force a set belief or value on a person, because the educated were very hard to control. So education was a good tool for us to control their thoughts and their behavior. In both perspectives, education is meant to guide oneself for the future. It's about a future self. So what really is the objective of an education? It's to prepare us for a global community. It's no longer just a localized context, but a global community, and to prepare us for that future through the availability of choices that are provided to you as a learner, and to empower our learners to make decisions on those choices based on the following needs of that learner in the current moment, as well as the future needs of that learner. To consider the strengths of the learner at the present moment, as well as future strengths or potential strengths that we would like to develop. The ambition of the learner, and of course the interests of the learner, because we all know how closely linked interest is to motivation and to lifelong learning. So then let's take a closer look at what choice means as far as the Singapore education context is concerned. Now this line here has been taken from Mr. Ong Ye Kun's speech at the OECD Singapore Conference on Higher Education Futures in 2015. And I like this because he says that choices that are available in Singapore's education system is similar to a full range of square pegs, round pegs, and new and fantastical shapes. That Singapore is no longer keen on a cookie-cutter education and is preparing for an education that accepts the diversity of its learners and the diverse needs of its learners. Now this is mirrored in the Ministry of Education Singapore's website, where it also talks about the choices that are available to its learners. The Singapore education is now offering a more flexible and diverse educational system with the provision of greater choices for its learners, and again, in line with their diverse needs and interests. And of course, that choice is now an enabler, because by learners being able to make their own decisions about their learning, they take ownership of their learning, and then learning becomes their own. Now, but what about future? Now that we are clear that choices are available in our education system, what about the future? And this again is taken from the same speech by Mr. Ong Ye Kun, where he says education systems exist and have meaning only in context, and these very contexts are evolving. Vygotsky said, for instance, that disability is not so much defined by the deficits in themselves, but rather by their social consequences. And so the context impacts how you would understand something to be an ability or a disability. So context becomes very critical. And yet the context constantly changes, right? With the scientific advancements and the technological advancements that we're seeing these days, it's very hard to pinpoint and define a future context, or even the present context sometimes is evolving constantly. So it is a challenging task, but not doing so would disadvantage our students. But let's not underestimate how challenging that is to anticipate the future, because some great minds have got it wrong. So Thomas Edison, for instance, said that the house of the next century will be furnished from basement to attic with steel. The baby of the 21st century will be rocked in a steel cradle. His father will sit in a steel chair at a steel dining table, and his mother's boudoir will be sumptuously equipped with steel furnishings. Not quite. Huh? A little bit more for your entertainment. The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad. Imagine making that prediction. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Television won't last because people will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night. So while we acknowledge that the future is important for our learners and that our education considers that, it is challenging to predict. The Ministry of Education Singapore does acknowledge that the future is a critical part of how it develops its education for its learners. Singapore's education system is world-renowned. It has excellent resources, great facilities, well-trained teachers, students who are driven and committed to high achievement. And it's these strengths that help us, and we're building on these strengths as we prepare the next generation of Singaporeans for the future. This is in the website. And this is a future that brings tremendous opportunity, but it will also bring many changes that we cannot foresee. Again, bringing us back to the notion of the unpredictability of the future. But ultimately, cultural, moral, and intellectual mindsets define the current context, and the perspectives on the future are driven by technological and scientific advancements. So perhaps by looking at the current context, we can better understand what is needed and better plan for the future. So let's look at certain current assumptions and understandings about dyslexia. What is dyslexia? What is dyslexia support? And who are the dyslexics? Let's take a quick look. What is dyslexia? Now, dyslexia is neurologically based, hence there are accompanying cognitive deficits and difficulties like phonological processing issues, difficulties or differences in the way we process sounds, the way we process visual stimuli, difficulties with timing, with coordination, etc. And these are often best or most observable through literacy needs. So a dyslexic learner will have difficulties with reading, writing, spelling, and it's often what is considered to be an easy task. So it is almost an unexpected difficulty with managing what might be considered a relatively easy task, like reading. But we know that intelligence does not correlate with that skill. A study in Yale showed that intelligence, in fact, does correlate with a learner's ability to read if they are neurotypical as learners, but not so much with the dyslexic learner. We now know, or we would prefer to understand dyslexia as a difference rather than a disability, because we know that culture defines what an ability is or a disability is. So for instance, in a literate culture like ours, not being able to read, write, or spell is considered a weakness, and therefore a disability. But consider for a moment if our culture valued art or music equally, like literacy, then a person who cannot draw or a person who cannot sing, for instance, would be considered disabled. It is a heterogeneous syndrome because the profiles are quite varied, and that adds to the complexity about who the dyslexic is. And of course, it is for life. With the increased awareness and the research that has gone into understanding the needs of a learner with dyslexia, we've been able to expand the period of intervention from the primary and the secondary levels to the pre-primary age groups as well. And the question really for us is, do we need to further expand it to the post-secondary, the tertiary, and the young adults, even to the workplace, as far as support is concerned? The simple argument here, of course, is the inability to read or the inability to comprehend, for instance, limits access to information. And often it's been said that that's a very similar experience to one who is visually impaired or hearing impaired, because it limits access to information. So what about support? What is the current perspective on support? Well, many years ago, intervention used to focus only on the student. So remediation was all about fixing the student. But we've since moved away from that perspective. We know that intervention is focused on both the student and the curriculum. and that only difficulties that impact adaptive functioning, which is the physical, social, and the mental abilities of the learner, are meaningful as far as support for them is concerned. So for example, if a child or learner is able to navigate the streets using Google Maps, is there a real need for us to teach them how to read physical maps? We now know that supportive life experiences, a community of people who understand and believe in the learner are important, and so is meaningful literacy, where learning is based on what is of interest to them and what is of value to them. We also know that technology is a critical aspect of emerging literacy, and that I'd like to turn your attention to the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard that was published in 2006 to make a point on this. They require all textbooks to be available in two formats, one in the print format and another in the digital format. And it needs to be available to the learner free of charge and in a timely fashion. So we've shifted from a traditional print-based instruction to one that is technologically embracing as well. And while previously assessments were primarily considered to give you access to resources, right, to determine eligibility for funding as well as support, now we understand that assessments are perfect for us to better understand the learner. So they're profiling tools for us to better understand the patterns of strengths and weaknesses of a learner so that we provide more comprehensive support for them. And of course, universal design for learning. Many schools have adopted this because it's an attempt to remove the systemic barriers that prevent access for our learners as far as learning is concerned. And I must thank my colleague Albert Lee for sharing this picture with me. And this describes perfectly, I think, the journey that education has taken. The first one is where all children are treated equally. So everyone's given the exact same thing. We since moved from there to providing children based on what is fair, in other words, what they need, an equitable sort of structure. And now UDL proposes that we remove barriers such that accommodations as well as special support is no longer required within the system itself. And who are the dyslexics? Humans are very varied, dyslexics are very varied as well. And interestingly, this information might show us how complex the dyslexic profile can be. Approximately 50% of children with dyslexia will meet the criteria for developmental coordination disorder. Learners with speech and language impairment, between 31 to 36% of them will later develop literacy difficulties, very much like dyslexia. Children who have ADHD and reading disabilities, there is a comorbid rate of 25 to 40%. And learners with math disorder, or now known as specific learning abilities with impairment in mathematics, between 70 to 70% will have a reading difficulty, and learners who have a reading difficulty, between 11 to 56% of them may have math disorder. So studies have shown that up to 50% of our dyslexic learners have co-occurring difficulties, which means that comorbidity is not the exception. In fact, it is the norm. This graph was created by my colleague Liu Yimei. She'll be making a presentation later on about trends in assessment, and she'll be elaborating on this. But the reason why I put this here is to demonstrate to you that it's not just international statistics. Local stats also show us, our experiences conducting assessments at the DAS do show us that the comorbid rates are prevalent. And of course you have dyslexics who are dually exceptional, the twice exceptional learners. Learners who are highly gifted, cognitively able, and yet struggle with what might be considered basic tasks like reading. In the US alone, there's approximately about 300,000 twice exceptional learners. In a gifted population, it's estimated that 30% of them will have a learning disability. As far as the learning disability population is concerned, between 1 to 14% of them might be gifted. In addition to that, we've heard about the gifts that come along with dyslexia. We can also consider the challenges that dyslexia provides as a way for us to form these gifts such as courage, resilience, leadership skills. For those of you who are familiar with basketball, you may know about this player called Isaiah Thomas, who is a Boston Celtics player, one of the best players in the league right now. He's also known as the little man because he's also the shortest player in the league. Now, in an interview, he candidly commented about how he and his father used to drive from playground to playground to find games for him to play because he worked extremely hard to develop his skills as a basketball player. The other thing he mentioned, of course, is that he learned how to trash talk in court. And he would trash talk to the opposing players as a way to intimidate them because his physique wasn't intimidating enough. And he became so good at it that he overcame his small stature and he actually started to intimidate them just with trash talking. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what we teach our children to do, but this is an example of how a disability or a weakness in a particular area, a challenge, could actually result in us developing certain gifts. So now that we've reviewed certain current perspectives about dyslexia, I think we can narrow it down to 5 main themes. And these themes, while they're applicable to all learners in general, I think are extremely critical for learners who have dyslexia and co-occurring difficulties. One is for us to consider the diversity of our learners. 2, the aptness of support. 3, the need for a continuous service. 4, that we need to go beyond English. And 5, the gifts and talents of our learners. So let's consider the themes for the future. The diversity of our learners. Now, all humans are heterogeneous, and the variation in our brain functions is what leads to our unique talents and abilities. What you can do, I may not, and what you may not be able to. So these are all a result of how heterogeneous we are as a group. But we also know that culture determines weakness and strengths. 100 years ago, perhaps, or during the industrial age, for instance, an able-bodied man would be considered an advantage. His physical strength would be an ability that would be well received. However, in this innovation age, is physical strength still considered advantageous? So the question to teachers, for instance, is do you want to develop a Hercules or do you want to develop a hacker? Which would be considered a strength in this current context? And we also know that research has shifted away from looking at dyslexia and its complexity and the varying profiles within dyslexia, so a vertical paradigm of sorts, to one that is more horizontal in understanding the co-occurrences, the comorbidities that overlap with dyslexia and therefore interfere or influence the dyslexic abilities as well as disabilities. And we also know that we need to go beyond just reading intervention because our learners have strengths and weaknesses and a more holistic approach to support is required. So what is the first assurance of potential for education? That education embraces diversity through teaching, curriculum, and evaluation strategies. What about the appropriateness of support then? Now, support can be identified or classified into 3 categories. 1, the biological, 2, the cognitive, and 3, the behavioral. Now, if you look at biological interventions, for example, we're looking at things like special diets that are rich in specific oils, or homeopathy, acupuncture, etc. Now, a survey was done in the UK, and of the parents who opted for biological interventions, about 54 to 55% of them saw dyslexia as an illness. So clearly that's a perspective that we don't want to encourage. And we look at cognitive interventions. Example of such are like phonics or phonemic awareness training, music training. An example of a program is Fast Forward. And research has shown that a combination of phonics and phonemic awareness training does yield positive results in learners. And what about behavioral interventions? So paired reading is an example of a behavioral intervention. Repeated reading is another. A study done in the US for the Reading Accelerator program found that behavioral interventions such as RAP do yield, again, positive results. If you look at all the research, it's then suggesting that a combination approach, one that combines the cognitive and the behavioral interventions, are highly recommended. But beyond just looking at the intervention approach, what should be in an intervention program? The National Reading Panel, as well as other established bodies, have suggested the following: that it must include phonemic awareness, phonics, reading accuracy and fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, as well as spelling and writing. Now, for support to be appropriate, we cannot ignore the importance of technology, because our learners have changed, the way they learn has also changed. How many of us still refer to those big books called encyclopedias instead of Googling an answer? We have changed the way we seek information as well as the way information is received. And so that needs to be replicated as we teach our learners. We also know that technology is an enabler and a leveler. It minimizes disabilities that are caused by print, for instance. And while print is permanent and has its place, it does sometimes come across as rather rigid. Whereas technology and the digital platforms do allow for collaboration, expansion, and creativity. I mean, children are using a variety of tools to express themselves these days, and they're all available through the digital format. And as a result, our basic platforms have shifted somewhat, and they should continue to shift. And these basic platforms, when they shift from print to technology, do allow us to cater to the different needs of our learners. So resources, materials can be better differentiated when they're put online. And at this point, it's noteworthy to mention dyslexia. Many of us who support learners belong to a group called the digital immigrants, right? And our students, our learners, are digital natives. So dyslexia here suggests that some of us might feel a bit of fear when it comes to the use of technology, incompetence perhaps, or inadequacy when it comes to the use of technology. And we need to break free from that and continue to embrace. And I know it's hard because it keeps changing. Technology keeps developing and improving. And just when you think you've understood it, it's throwing something new at you. And that really is the exciting thing about technology. So what's the second assurance, second promise that education can make? Is that it includes a combination intervention approach, and it goes beyond basic reading and spelling through integrated technology use. Now let's turn our attention to the continuity of service. As mentioned, with a lot of the research that's coming out as well as the awareness that's being raised, we have expanded our intervention to include the preschool group. And we know that the younger the child, the more progress is achieved, and therefore better the prognosis for the future. So let's for a moment turn our attention then to the post-secondary and adult group. The DAS conducts adult assessments, and in 2015 we saw a spike in the number of assessments, the number of adult assessments. In 2016 and 2017, 22% of these assessments were for adults. The highest age group of those who came to seek assessments and who were adults were between the ages of 20 to 29, and they were junior college and university students primarily. Now, while we might consider that these students are capable because they've moved from the pre-primary education and they've transited to the primary and the secondary education, and they've in fact done well to enter university or junior college, their evolving needs need to be taken into consideration. So it's no longer about content information at this point, but rather certain coping strategies and skills, such as study skills, note-taking, time management, inhibition or control. So these are the kind of skills that we would be helping our learners with at that age group. So what's the third assurance or promise that education can make? That its support continues, but in recognition of the evolving needs of our learners. And we know that we know that dyslexia affects more than English. We know that it doesn't discriminate and it impacts languages, all languages. But it also impacts other subject areas. So for instance, dyslexia can impact learning in subjects like math, social studies, history, science, etc. And again, it can boil down to access to information and comprehension of that information. And the minute a dyslexic learner is slower at understanding information, he's already a step behind his peers. And that, of course, could lead to other difficulties and complications. But besides just learning, there is also his demonstration of his knowledge. So if, for instance, in a science paper, he's expected to demonstrate his understanding of a topic through the written form, then the same dyslexia difficulties he would surface in English would surface in that test paper as well. And therefore, his ability to demonstrate his knowledge will be limited. Let's look more specifically about how dyslexia could impact the learning of these subjects. For science, for instance, there are new vocabularies to learn. You need to be able to identify key points when you're reading certain information. And there is the step-by-step instructions that you'll need to follow when it comes to conducting experiments. For mathematics, that's the math terminology to learn. Symbols and directionality, 25, 52, that's the numerical equivalent of a BD reversal. Yeah? And there are word problems, and I must say Singapore is famous for its word problems. At the end of every major exam in social media, certain word problems will be circulated and parents will be wondering, how do our children solve these problems? So word problems are a big issue, and to be able to read and comprehend them is quite critical. And what about history? A subject like history, there are dates, there are sequences of the events to remember, maps to read, and the ability to discern between what is a key and important fact and from the unimportant, really. So dyslexia does impact the ability to learn and the ability to demonstrate learning in other subjects. So what's the fourth assurance, or the promise that education can make, is that intervention extends to all subjects, not just English. And lastly, and most importantly, I think, gifts and talents. We all have unique skills. Matthew Bickerton, who is a member of the International Dyslexia Association, as well as a British Dyslexia Association mentor, talks about this and mentions about how dyslexia as a challenge has provided him with certain skills like delegation ability, because you're self-aware, you're aware of the difficulties you have, and therefore how you need to gain help from others around you in order to perform a task. Leadership skills, coaching skills, because you begin to realize the difficulties you've surfaced and you become more empathetic. So there are certain skills that dyslexics have that we will want to continue to encourage. Norman Geschwin argued that the extraordinary brain of the dyslexic may be organized in a way that makes it hard for it to learn to read following standard instruction, but this same unusual organization enables the dyslexic to excel in other fields. Sally Shabitz calls this the sea of strength, and so not identifying or grooming these strengths is tantamount to polluting the sea. And so it's the responsibility of all adults working with such learners to promote exceptionalism in all children. So it's not just about identifying and grooming such talents. It's also about providing them with a platform to showcase these talents, and as well as introducing them to peers, a community with similar interests and abilities, such that they can find their likeness in other people and feel a part of a community. So the fifth promise, really, is that education develops exceptionality. So what does all of this look like pictorially? So it appears that intervention, which is very critical for dyslexic learners and those with co-occurring difficulties, must begin with some basic reading and spelling intervention. But it cannot stop there. It expands to advanced skills like reading comprehension, writing, study skills. And then it expands beyond that to go beyond the English language to other subject areas as well. And of course, talent development, where we encourage and identify talents of our learners so that they can see themselves as complete people. And of course, to better understand the profile of dyslexia, which includes the co-occurring difficulties. This, of course, is not limited to a specific population or age group and should be provided throughout the learner's learning journey. And it should be propped up by professional development of those working with this population, as well as research which then guides us on what is best practice, what is good, and what could be improved on. Now, in all of this, we cannot underestimate the importance of the teacher. So the role of the teacher is critical. The teacher needs to have a comprehensive understanding of the knowledge, skills, and motivations of their learners. And that would require them, for instance, to look at assessment reports and thoroughly analyze both the patterns of strengths and weaknesses. And with that information, design learning, implement learning, and evaluate learning in an intentional way. But ladies and gentlemen, the future is still unpredictable. But thinking ahead really is the first step towards meeting that promise of an education. So let's recap. What is that promise? That it embraces diversity through teaching, curriculum, and evaluation. That it includes combination approaches, going beyond basic reading and spelling through integrated technology use. That it continues to provide support for learners through recognition of their evolving needs. That it extends to all subjects beyond English. And that we develop exceptionality. With these, our education can deliver the promise of preparing our learners for the future. The choice really is ours. The choice really is yours. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great conference.
Right, thank you, Ms. Geetha. That was an insightful discussion on a promising education for our learners with dyslexia. May I invite Mr. Eric Lee to come up on stage to present Ms. Geetha with a token of appreciation. Mr. Eric Lee, please. you, Ms. Eric Lee, and thank you, Ms. Geetha.